Welcome to This Is How, an ACLU of North Carolina podcast that unlocks the untold stories of justice, freedom, and activism from right here in North Carolina. We will explore how we can make change happen one voice at a time. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered to create a fairer future for all. And now, here's our host.
Welcome back to This Is How, a podcast where we explore the complexities of the criminal legal system, the importance of civil liberties, and the personal stories of those impacted throughout the state of North Carolina. In today's episode, we will walk you through a critical issue that certain detainees in North Carolina jails are experiencing because of systemic and institutional failures. This issue arises when a detainee is deemed incapable to proceed to trial. Before we dive too far, it's important to understand what it means to be labeled incapable to proceed to trial, also known as ITP. Sometimes a person who is detained experiences mental health or cognitive disabilities, which can render them unable to understand the nature of the legal proceedings, unable to comprehend their situation related to other proceedings, or unable to assist in their defense in a rational or reasonable manner. When this happens, they are labeled ITP because they are considered incapable to proceed to a trial on the criminal charges that they face. When a detainee is labeled ITP, they must undergo a capacity assessment, which determines their ability to understand and participate in the criminal proceedings. These are carried out by evaluators designated by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, and after these assessments, the detainees often go back to jail to await a capacity hearing. Once the capacity assessment report is completed and reviewed by a judge, the judge may order restorative services. If so, the detainee will go to a state psychiatric hospital to receive services intended to restore their capacity and make them able to proceed to trial. The problem in North Carolina is that ITP detainees are frequently being forced to wait for months before their capacity assessments are completed and the reports are handed to a judge. And even after a judge receives this report and orders restorative services for a detainee, the detainee often continues to wait for months before they have a spot open for them at a state psychiatric hospital. Through all of these delays in receiving capacity assessment reports and restorative services, the detainee remains in jail and frequently experiences mental decline. As we speak, there are many ITP detainees in jails throughout North Carolina. On average, North Carolinians deemed ITP wait 68 days for capacity evaluation reports and 145 days to be placed in a psychiatric hospital for restoration services. Without an efficient process in place by DHHS, these delays negatively impact not only detainees, but strain the resources of the jails in which they are being held. So in order to combat these delays, the ACLU of North Carolina Legal Foundation, Disability Rights North Carolina, and the law firm of Arnold and Porter filed a complaint against NC-DHHS. This complaint asserts that NC-DHHS has failed to provide timely capacity evaluations and restoration services to these vulnerable individuals, putting their mental health and safety at risk during prolonged detention in jails. Today, we are joined by Michele Delgado, who is a lawyer with the ACLU of NC, and who will provide us with more information about this pressing issue. Thank you for joining us, Michele.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so to start us off, can you explain what prompted the ACLU of NC to issue this complaint?
Sure. So Disability Rights North Carolina, DRNC, they contacted us about this systemic issue that they were hearing about from impacted families. And I recall that our legal team talked about the issue. I explained that this is something that I had seen firsthand during my time as an assistant public defender. And from that point on, we decided to investigate and get involved with DRNC.
Okay. And what is actually causing the delays that the ITP detainees are experiencing?
So the delays are being caused by DHHS facilities having a wait list to be admitted for their services, whether it's to be evaluated for a capacity assessment. They have LME MCOs who have forensic evaluators who are there to evaluate the people who are incarcerated. but they're taking a bit longer to do that. And then as far as the state psychiatric hospitals, that's where people typically go for restoration services. There's a long wait list at all 3 state hospitals to be admitted, and it's because of a lack of staffing, not as many beds. There's also a large portion of people at these state hospitals who are ready for discharge but have not been discharged back to the community. So that's what's causing the delays.
Wow. And how do these prolonged delays impact the mental health and the well-being of pretrial detainees?
It is impacting them in a really negative way. As ITP detainees are held in these jails that are not really equipped for this community of people because they do not have the psychiatric services that they need. The ITP detainees are decompensating. Sometimes this shows up as causing erratic behavior, sometimes episodes where they might harm themselves or even other incarcerated people or jail staff, and just getting them deeper and deeper into their symptoms and further harm.
Right. So why is it important for people to care about these issues that the ITP detainees are facing right now?
It's important for people to care about this because ITP detainees are people just like our family members, our friends. They're as human as any of us. Right. And furthermore, they're innocent until proven guilty, right? Like our legal system says that, until you are convicted, you are innocent, you are owed your day in court. This group of people are waiting for their day in court, but they need that mental health services and treatment first. And also, too, if everyone in this country believes that people are owed, medical help, how is mental health help different? We should be wanting to help everyone, no matter what their circumstances are when it comes to medical treatment and mental health treatment.
Yeah, and I think it's important to highlight that, too, just how it affects everyone, not just the ITP detainees themselves, but the entire community.
Right, and it really just benefits the whole community if people that need psychiatric help receives it, because at some point, this group of people are in our communities, right? A lot of the reasons that they may end up in custody is because of not receiving medications or help that they need. If we really treated everyone, then a lot of these violent moments or unfortunate events wouldn't have occurred because people would have been receiving services.
Exactly. And what is the lawsuit against the NCD-HHS hoping to achieve?
What it's hoping to achieve is to really cause a systemic change. Right now, the system that we have here in North Carolina, it's not working. There's long wait times for everyone who's incarcerated. The jail staff are overwhelmed. Hospital staff are overwhelmed. We just want to see a systemic change. We want to see creative solutions, whether that's community-based restoration. We want to see a huge change in our mental health system and see people really, really invest in the system and really invest in mental health.
Right. And today we are also joined by Miss Jama Hinson, who has a son who is ITP and is currently experiencing delays. She has graciously decided to tell her and her son's story on the podcast episode today. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Hinson, and for being willing to share with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to share what our family has experienced the last year and a half plus.
All right. So I understand your son has experienced delays in receiving capacity evaluations or restoration services while being ITP. And in whatever detail that you're comfortable with sharing, can you explain the entire situation to us?
So my son Jake was arrested Mother's Day weekend of May 2023 and held detained in the detention center for 49 days before he was able to receive the initial assessment. And at the time of his arrest, Jake was in a state of psychosis with grandiose delusion. So he was extremely paranoid, displaying schizophrenic type behavior. And they did put him into an isolated area for his protection and for others. But actually, that only led to him mentally deteriorating further. During that period of time, he didn't receive any medical attention. And our family went for over 2 months before we ever even received a phone call from him, because he was in such a state of paranoia and delusion. So I apologize. He did finally have, the judge finally ordered capacity assessment for him late July 27th. And that capacity assessment report was returned back to the court September 13th. The judge then heard those findings, and that took place October 24th of last year's, where they ordered him to Broughton for capacity restoration. He was deemed not capable of going to court for his charges, which were not nonviolent. So from October 24th until Tuesday of this week, he waited to be taken to Broughton's psychiatric facility for treatment. In a nutshell, he did not receive any psychiatric services the entire time he has been being detained in Watauga's system, in the detention center where he'd been held. He was sent short-term to an emergency facility where he was given some immediate medication relief, and that, thank God, restored him somewhat to gain a little bit of stability until he could get inpatient for a lengthier treatment.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. And it's so important for people to hear these real life examples of how people are affected by this. So thank you for sharing. And if you want to go deeper into that, what was this experience like for you and your son and your entire family?
Well, you touched on it earlier with the community aspect, and we have a very tight-knit family. We're a large family, but our this particular family member is, some people would say, codependent, but he's one of those kids that reaches out to a family member, calls every day. And so it was devastating for us emotionally, for his grandparents, for myself, for his sibling, to go weeks on end without even knowing if he was even alive. And with someone having mental illness, you're constantly, you have concerns. It's always in the forefront of your mind that, that they're going to maintain stability. But he's one of those individuals that fell through the cracks because he had a couple of minor infractions with the law that resulted in him getting given, instead of being ordered involuntarily to have to go for treatment, they gave him 3 days in psychiatric care, and then you're released after 72 hours. And the system is so broken that these individuals, like my son, and there's thousands, they're falling through the cracks. And like Michele said, they are the most vulnerable in our community. And it's very disheartening to see how we have abandoned them in a way, to not be able to provide services, as Michele said, like we would for someone needing medical services. And they are decompensating much greater level in these jails and detention centers, not receiving the medications, treatment. And I don't fault the staff, the employees, the correctional officers, because they're not the ones, they weren't trained to treat mental illness in the jails and detention centers. They are becoming mental health workers because so many people are being arrested and going through the system and recycling, rinse and repeat. And we're not breaking this bad cycle. We have to find a better way. Right.
And speaking to that abandonment that some of our most vulnerable populations are facing, can you kind of re-highlight this? You spoke on it a bit before, just the amount of time between when your son was detained and when all of this took place? Like, what was the window of that?
From the time he was brought in, there was no mental evaluation done, no psychiatric evaluation done, absolutely, positively nothing. So he went before the judge for the arraignment, I believe that's what you would call it, for his, to hear, I guess, I'm not exactly sure what the arraignment period involves, but he went from middle of May until late July before his court-appointed attorney pleaded with a judge to order for a forensic evaluation. And so from that period on, late July, I believe it was, until September 13th, that period of time, that's not quite 2 months, but that's an enormous amount of time for someone to still be lingering in a jail cell. And the administrative powers that be, everything going through the process of processing the evaluation report. That's medically, we wouldn't allow that to happen to someone with a medical infirmity, physical infirmity. But with mental illness, as Michele said, the system is not addressing and making high priority for people suffering with genuine mental illness diseases. It's a tragedy.
Wow. And I can add in on the timeline question. So it seems that Ms. Hinson's son has been incarcerated since early May, Mother's Day weekend of last year, and has been incarcerated in that jail until August 6th, this past Tuesday, until he was sent to a state psychiatric hospital. So that is more than a year of just being incarcerated. It took 49 days just for him to receive, just from the point that a capacity evaluation was ordered to the date that report was returned to court. That was 49 days, if you take that segment out. And then the next important segment is the 288 days from the date that the judge ordered that he receives capacity restoration services at a state psychiatric hospital to the date he was finally transported to that hospital. It took 288 days. And what's sad about this is that his journey in this system is still not done. Once he receives those services, he still has to come back to the jail and then await his court date. And let's hope that he doesn't decompensate during that wait and have to restart the process. And what's also important is that during this whole entire time frame from May 2023 to now, he has not been sentenced at all. Like, these are pretrial detainees that we're talking about. The facts of the case have not been heard. Witnesses have not been called. This is all pre-trial. They are still presumed innocent until proven guilty. They are not convicted.
After all of that time?
Correct.
Wow. And during this entire process, were you kept in the loop on the amount of time that it would take, Ms. Hinson?
Unfortunately, no. Jake was deemed indigent because he had been living as a homeless individual, mostly because of his mental illness issues, in and out of a job, not able to keep housing. So a court-appointed attorney was assigned, and he was so paranoid in the beginning for weeks and months. Actually, it was at least 6 months before his court-appointed attorney ever even visited him. Wow. One time. And even then, I had to find creative ways to try to get communication with the attorney, because technically I didn't have the authority, because my son didn't have the mindset to say, hey, I would like for one of my family members to be able to have access to, communicate with you. He didn't even have the stability with his mind to even be able to voice that. I did have an advocate that was a former family law attorney from Delaware who resides in my hometown, and he actually assisted me in communicating with the attorney and sort of opened up a channel for us to try to get some answers. But it was extremely difficult. I called numerous times to the facility, to the detention center, but was oftentimes said, they told me, we can't tell you anything. Family members attempted to visit him on several occasions, but he was at that point of extreme psychosis that he wouldn't even accept seeing a very close family member that my brother, his uncle, one of his favorite people. It was very, very difficult. Only by the grace of God and our faith were we able to endure. And I'm on the outside, and I can't imagine what his mind was enduring all that time.
Right. And not being able to have that contact, it just sounds heartbreaking. And I'm wondering, throughout this entire process, did you receive any type of other support during these delays?
Sadly, no. There is not any type of advocacy group that I'm aware of, or case management team, or anyone within the detention center where he has been housed, the jail in the county where he has been since last May. There's no collaboration of legal or social workers or anything to say, hey, we understand your adult son has mental illness. This is what we can try to do short term to try to help ease things for him while he is awaiting to be sent to a psychiatric facility to hopefully regain his capacity. Nothing like that exists that I'm aware of in the county where he's been held. Possibly there is something in the state, but there was nothing in our region of the western part of North Carolina.
Wow. And to follow that, I would ask, what did you feel like you needed during this time that wasn't provided to you?
Wow, that's a loaded question. That basic word, communication, and the system, sadly, as anyone in the legal field knows, that, client, attorney, confidentiality, it's the same in the medical profession. The challenge is for someone with mental illness, as my son was experiencing, particularly schizophrenia type symptoms, paranoia, they don't know who is their friend and who's their enemy. And so they are reluctant to want to give any information or give any permission for anything because they're just not able, they're not stable to, you can't rationalize with them, reason with them. And so the roadblock that we hit was, we can't do anything unless he gives us permission to talk with you. Okay, that tells me that I know my son. I know that he would talk with his mom. He's never not wanted to talk with his mom. So there's that roadblock, just not having the ability to communicate with law enforcement or anyone that's on the inside that can be of any help to ease our fear or our anxiety. And my son has two little daughters who he's had no communication with. One will be 9 and one just turned 4. And, it doesn't just affect the inmate. It has an extended damaging effect on family members as well. And I wish there was a way within the North Carolina system to be more inclusive with family members, particularly of someone dealing with mental illness.
Right. And would you say that lack of communication was the biggest barrier for you all during this time, or would you say it was something else?
I would say lack of communication, lack of ability to navigate or have an option to communicate. And if there'd been some sort of a liaison program that exists, that would be a possibility. But also the number one would be certainly the inmate suffering with mental illness, their welfare. They should be, like any patient with any medical infirmity, They should be number one. They should be getting the treatment, emergency treatment they need to get them stabilized. If you were an inmate having a seizure, a heart attack, any other physiological ailment, you would, be taken to the emergency room of any hospital and be hospitalized, admitted until you were stabilized and could then be released back to your facility. That's not the way it is in North Carolina when it comes to dealing with mentally ill people. And I think, number one, treating the mentally ill on an emergency basis, when they're in that acute crisis stage, to get them stable is number one priority. And number two, having some sort of a liaison communication with family, that's their support system, right. Their only support system. And many of them don't even have that.
So, Ms. Hinson, if there was one thing you could share with other families who have family members that are ITP, or one thing you would share with DHHS about this, what would you say?
What I would say is that first and foremost, don't lose hope. When it seems like there is no hope, just keep holding on. And I don't have all the answers, but I would encourage someone with a family member who is struggling, as similar situation to my son, to reach out to your local people in your local communities that work in behavioral mental health field, whether that's in a private setting or the local clinic settings. There are professionals in that field, and to ask if they've had any connections with networking with individuals, working with people incarcerated in the system, in the criminal justice system. There very well could be some liaisons within the counties. I have not been able to find one in the county where my son has been held, but there very likely could be someone that works within the criminal justice system that helps families to navigate. I want to use this situation with my son and turn this for good. Whatever I can do as a parent, as a family member of an adult child who struggles with mental illness, that's gone through the falling through the cracks in this ridiculous system, to be able to be a voice for the voiceless. And as I said earlier, these people are the most vulnerable in our communities, but we owe it to them. And I will fight. I'll fight with everything I have to push through the doors to make change, because nothing changes if nothing changes. But don't lose hope. There is a way. There is always a better way. There's always something that can be done. You just have to have faith and stay hopeful. And maybe next time we can do a follow-up and we'll have a positive update to report, and we'll have other options that might be accessible to family members who are going through similar situations. I sure hope for that in the near future.
And I would also like to add, to all the family members who are impacted by this terrible system, I want you to know that this lawsuit against DHHS is on behalf of all of your family members, whether you have contacted us or not. If you can relate to what Ms. Hinson has shared with us today, understand that we are advocating on behalf of all ITP detainees across the state. We hope that this lawsuit brings systemic change, and we hope that your loved ones receive the help that they need. You can follow along with our lawsuit online at the ACLU of North Carolina.org, and check out our DRNC versus NC DHHS lawsuit for updates.
Yes, we're going to take your advice on that. We're going to stay hopeful Thank you so much, Michele and Ms. Hinson, for joining us today. And thank you for your incredibly valuable insights regarding the situation that ITP detainees are facing.
Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to express my part.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Michele. And thank you to you, Ms. Hinson, for joining us on today's episode and providing such incredible and valuable insights into the situation that ITP detainees are facing. It's not lost upon us how urgent this situation is. People with mental health disabilities are languishing in North Carolina jails for months, awaiting evaluations to see if they can even stand trial. Remember, they are presumed innocent under the law, so in some cases, these wait times could extend past what their sentence may have even been if they were actually convicted. This is not right. We must acknowledge the worsening of their conditions as they wait, which could increase their risk of self-harm, harm inflicted by others, or harm inflicted on others. Being aware of what ITP detainees are experiencing is important in holding the NC DHHS accountable for treating all people with dignity, respect, and humanity. The more we understand the impacts that these delays have on ITP detainees, the more important it becomes to fight for their rights in receiving timely capacity evaluations and restorative services. By pushing back against these untimely delays, we are telling the Department of Health and Human Services in North Carolina that we see ITP detainees and we demand fair, respectful, and humane treatment for them. This is how we fight for and protect the rights of ITP detainees in North Carolina.
Thank you for joining This Is How, brought to you by the ACLU of North Carolina. If this episode resonates with you, we challenge you to take action. If you go to ACLUofNorthCarolina.org, you'll find ways to donate and volunteer. Join us on social media as well. And if you like the show, share it with your network, subscribe on YouTube or a podcast app, or give us a rating at ratethispodcast.com/ACLUNC. This episode was edited and produced by Earfluence. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon on This Is How.